Somewhere in eastern China, there's a version of Paris. Not a theme park, not a postcard set. A real, fully built residential city. Apartments, boulevards, fountains, and a 108-meter steel Eiffel Tower. All sitting in the middle of Zhejiang province. Completely empty. No tourists, no residents, just wind. Most people who've seen the photos assume this is a punchline, an embarrassing footnote about China building too fast, too recklessly, with no real plan for who'd actually show up. A ghost city. A joke. They're missing the point entirely. Because this wasn't a failure of urban planning. This wasn't miscalculation. By most investigative accounts, Tianducheng, the city of heaven, was the most elegant money-hiding machine that hundreds of millions of dollars could construct. A cement safe the size of a neighborhood. And the man who designed it understood something that most people never figure out. The safest place to hide dirty money isn't a bank account in the Cayman Islands. It's inside 4 walls of poured concrete that nobody's asking questions about. This is his story. To understand how a man builds a fake Paris in a Chinese province, you have to go back to where he started. And Liu Zhongfu started at the very bottom. Born in Zhejiang province in the early 1950s, Liu grew up in a China that was still shaking off the wreckage of the Cultural Revolution. For over a decade, Mao's purges had hollowed out the economy, persecuted intellectuals, and made individual ambition essentially illegal. Getting ahead meant keeping your head down. To get rich is glorious. Deng Xiaoping. 4 words. That's all it took to flip a switch on 1.3 billion people. In 1978, Deng Xiaoping's economic reforms cracked the door open. Private enterprise became legal. Foreign investment trickled in, and China began what would become the fastest sustained economic expansion any country had ever seen. The ground was shaking with possibility, if you knew where to stand. Liu Zhongfu was a construction worker, an ironsmith, the guy who showed up on the site and worked with his hands. But while he was working, he was also watching. Every contract that got awarded, every official who signed off on it, every relationship that moved money from a government desk to a private account. He understood the machine before most people even knew there was one. In 1985, he founded what would become the Guangsha Group, a construction company out of Dongyang, Zhejiang. It wasn't flashy at first, but Liu had something more valuable than startup capital. He had deep, carefully cultivated relationships with Communist Party officials at the regional level. And in China, that's not just a business advantage. That is the business. He didn't just build buildings. He built access. He built proximity to the people who decided which contracts got issued, which projects got approved, and which companies got the call when 100 million yuan government developments landed on a committee table. By the late 1990s, the Guangsha Group was one of the largest private construction companies in China. Billions in annual revenue, projects spanning residential towers, hotels, tourism infrastructure, and government contracts across multiple provinces. Liu Zhongfu had gone from carrying iron on muddy construction sites to commanding an empire built on steel, concrete, and political capital. But ambition doesn't stop at successful. It asks the next question. And the next question Liu was asking, as his wealth and his party connections grew together, quietly and without public scrutiny, was how do you get untouchable? That question led him to Paris. The year is 2007. Hangzhou, Zhejiang province. The Guangsha Group pulls back the curtain on Tianducheng, the city of heaven. The pitch is extraordinary. A luxury European lifestyle community right here in China. Parisian boulevards, a Versailles-inspired fountain, French-style cafes, and a skyline anchored by a scale replica of the Eiffel Tower. Projected capacity? 10,000 residents. It didn't fill up. And that became the story the world told. China's ghost city. The poster child for reckless overbuilding. $100 million development that nobody wanted to live in. But there's a second story. A quieter one. And it has almost nothing to do with bad marketing. Here's how the real mechanics worked. By the mid-2000s, China's economic boom had created an enormous and enormously awkward problem for a specific class of people. Those who had gotten very rich in ways they couldn't fully explain. Government officials who'd quietly skimmed from state infrastructure projects. Businessmen whose fortunes had grown through party connections, kickbacks, and contracts that wouldn't survive a proper audit. Newly minted billionaires operating in an economy where the rules were, to put it generously, still being written. These people had money, serious money, and they needed somewhere to put it that wasn't a bank, because banks leave records. Somewhere that wasn't overseas, because moving capital out of China was heavily restricted. Somewhere that was legal, tangible, and defensible. Real estate was the answer. And the logic was airtight. You buy an apartment. It's a physical, appreciating asset. It sits on land. It has a deed with your name on it. And if any investigator ever knocks and asks where the money came from, you point at the walls. I invested in property. Hard to argue with. There's no suspicious wire transfer to flag. No offshore account to trace. Just concrete. Just a building that exists, that you own, and that, conveniently, you never needed to live in. Analysts and economists who've studied China's ghost city phenomenon have documented this pattern across dozens of developments. Properties purchased at scale, not as homes, but as hard asset storage for capital that couldn't circulate openly. A form of wealth preservation so normalized in certain circles that it barely registered as unusual. Tianducheng was perfect for this. Its location, 2 hours from Shanghai, away from the financial centers where scrutiny was most intense, was a feature, not a flaw. Its luxury branding gave buyers a cover story, and its sheer scale meant the transactions were spread across enough separate purchases that no single one looked unusual. Every dark window was a locked box. Every empty floor was a column in someone's hidden ledger. And Lu Zhongfu was the architect who built the vault, designed the locks, and sold the keys to exactly the kind of buyers who couldn't afford to be seen shopping anywhere else. By this point, his network reached the highest levels of Zhejiang's political apparatus. Lu wasn't just a tycoon. He was, by the accounts of investigators who came later, embedded in a web of party relationships whose financial entanglements with his own ran so deep they were nearly impossible to trace from the outside. Nearly. In November 2012, Xi Jinping became General Secretary of the Communist Party of China, and within weeks, he made something unmistakably clear. The era of selective enforcement was over. What followed wasn't a warning, it wasn't a gesture, it was a systematic institutional hunt. What Xi called targeting tigers and flies, the powerful and the small alike. In the first 3 years of the campaign, over 100,000 officials were investigated and punished. This wasn't a cleanup. It was a reckoning. And when you're hunting corruption money, you follow the assets. That always leads, eventually, to real estate. Investigators already knew what ghost cities looked like from the inside. Not failed developments, but physical ledgers. Units bought and never occupied. Transactions where the purchase price was one thing on paper and another in reality. Developments whose buyers' names, when cross-referenced with government salary records, raise the kind of questions that can end careers and lives. The noose around Lu Zhongfu's world tightened the way these things always do, slowly and then all at once. The officials he'd built relationships with, the provincial-level figures whose careers and his business empire had grown alongside each other for 3 decades, began appearing in investigation announcements. In China's political anti-corruption system, proximity to a disgraced official isn't neutral ground. It's a thread, and investigators pull threads. In 2014, Lu Zhongfu disappeared from public life. Not dramatically. There was no perp walk, no press conference. He simply stopped appearing at business forums, stopped being photographed with officials. The Guangxi Group, this construction empire spanning dozens of cities, tens of thousands of employees, went quiet at the top. Corporate announcements became sparse, leadership reshuffled behind closed doors. This is how China's system works at the highest levels. Before formal charges, before a courtroom, before any public statement, there's a period of managed disappearance. The party handles its own, internally, until the process is ready to go public. The empire didn't collapse overnight. Guangxi continued operating in parts, but the political architecture that had made Lu untouchable, the network of mutual protection built over 30 years, had crumbled. The people who'd shielded him were being prosecuted themselves, and without that cover, everything he'd built was exposed to a light he'd spent decades carefully keeping it out of. The Paris of the East sat empty. Not because no one wanted to live there, because the people who'd built it had never planned for anyone to. Here's the thing nobody planned for. People actually moved in. Not 10,000, not even close, but enough. Young couples priced out of central Hangzhou who realized that a Parisian-themed apartment with high ceilings and French ironwork was, by local standards, surprisingly affordable. The ghost city filled, partially, because the corruption economy that built it eventually priced itself out, and ordinary people stepped into the gap. And the Eiffel Tower replica? That became something extraordinary. Tianducheng is now one of the most popular wedding photography destinations in eastern China. Couples come from across Zhejiang and from provinces beyond to take photos in front of a 108-meter steel tower in fake Parisian streets, surrounded by buildings whose financial history is sealed behind walls that will probably never fully tell their story. They're laughing. They're happy. They have no idea. And that's the irony that stays with you long after this story ends. Lu Zhongfu set out to build an untouchable system, a city-sized safe disguised as a European lifestyle dream, designed to make billions disappear into walls and stay disappeared. He built it with the kind of political cover that's supposed to make men like him permanent, untouchable. The cover evaporated. The men who provided it were marched in front of party disciplinary committees, and Lu himself vanished into the same quiet institutional void that has swallowed so many powerful Chinese figures before him. But the city? The city survived him. It outlasted the scheme that funded it. It got repurposed, romanticized. The instrument of financial concealment became a backdrop for the most intimate human moment most people will ever photograph. The vault became a venue. There's something investigators say about financial schemes of this scale. The system always outlasts the schemer. You can build the most sophisticated architecture to hide dirty wealth. Shell corporations, layered transactions, ghost cities, a fake Eiffel Tower in a Chinese province. But the system develops its own gravity. its own inertia. And when the person who designed it falls, the system doesn't collapse with them. It just finds new owners. Lu Zhongfu is gone. The officials who protected him are gone. The money, most of it, is absorbed into a legal and political machine that is still working through what to do with it all. But Paris is still standing, 2 hours south of Shanghai. Surreal, half-empty, full of wedding photos and the quiet footsteps of people who never knew what the walls around them once meant. Thank you for exploring this corner of the world with WealthPersona. If this opened your eyes to how power and currency really move in the shadows, then our job here is done. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next layer we uncover, because the world is full of hidden empires, and you deserve to see them clearly.